Good afternoon, everybody. It's really my pleasure today to welcome you to this webinar. We're going to discuss how we can ensure that truly sustainable products are sold in the EU via recognition of corporate renewable energy procurement. So if we could just go to the next slide. Perfect. So my name is Annie Scanlon. I'm director of the Resource Platform. Resource's mission is to help corporates to use more renewable energy and decarbonize their Scope 2 emissions. Just a very quick reminder of what Scope 2 emissions are. So these are the indirect emissions of a company which stem from the energy sources which generate electricity to then power industrial processes. So this ranges from zero emissions, wind and solar, to high emissions such as fossil fuels. Now, despite most EU member states having some way to go before the grid is majority renewables, there are fortunately tools that can help companies decarbonize their energy and also help finance the energy transition. Now, a tool that has gained significant traction among companies and also here in Brussels is a renewable power purchase agreement. So this tool is where a corporate buyer, like a battery manufacturer, can purchase electricity directly from a renewable energy supplier. So the supplier and the buyer will agree things like the pricing structure, how the electricity will be delivered, and if this is via the grid, the corporate then gets an energy certificate, as we call them, a guarantee of origin in Europe, which means that that corporate can uniquely claim that electricity. But if it's an on-site model, the corporate then directly consumes that electricity in their processes. So this is really a win-win for corporate decarbonisation and also the financing of wind and solar assets. And this really reduces the need for public financing of new wind and solar. Just giving you a very quick overview of the different models that we see in Europe. As you can see, it's quite a diverse and dynamic market. It's really a flexible tool that corporates can then use to decarbonise these Scope 2 emissions. However, despite significant growth in this market, we're seeing in the draft rules for EV batteries carbon footprint that the current draft would not permit companies in the supply chain to use a PPA to demonstrate mitigated Scope 2 emissions. This would then set a legal precedent for other types of batteries, and then also could then set a legal precedent for other carbon footprint rules in the EU. So our excellent lineup of speakers today is going to explain to us why this is so hugely problematic from the perspectives of industrial decarbonisation, financing the energy transition, and energy market fundamentals. So we've got two quite significant players in the batteries industry today, which are Bosch, represented by Friederike, and Umicore, represented here today by Jan. And then to help us better understand the interaction of corporate procurement and the energy market, we have Merve from the Energy Certificates Association and Anne from ENGIE. And our intention today is really to make a strong call that this set of rules for EV batteries in the current text would penalise the vast majority of companies operating in the European battery supply chain and actually disincentivise companies from signing a PPA, which would be really bad news for Europe's net zero goals. So with that in mind, I'm really delighted to hand over to Jan for the first presentation.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Jan. I'm at Umicore. Umicore is a battery materials company. Well, not only batteries, it's in fact a materials company with added value and functional value to metals. So just a first picture on our company profile. So battery materials is, of course, what we are talking about today, but we are also in catalysts. So catalysts also for clean air in combustion engine cars. We have a policy that we will recycle everything that we put on the market, and not only that, we also recycle materials from other industrial players. And then we have also a section with specialty materials that cover a lot of a broad range of materials that have a function. I'm thinking about solar panels. But today, let's focus now on the battery materials. And where are we in this battery material value chain? It's in fact a long chain, and the battery regulation covers, in fact, all aspects of the production of batteries. So it starts with the acquisition of raw materials, and there the sustainability aspect is mainly, sorry, it's going too fast. It's mainly about the acquisition of raw materials. It's about the due diligence on what is the footprint of your raw materials on social, environmental, on climate. We are not doing this the mining, but we are entering the value chain in smelting and refining, and then we are producing the technology materials. So we are part of the production value chain, and in the production, what's important here on the sustainability measures, it's the carbon footprint, and that's the topic of the day, but also a recycled content. We are not really involved in the use phase, but we come back in the end of life management, so how to collect and recycle the batteries. But let's focus now on the carbon footprint calculation of the batteries. In fact, if you look at the scope 2 emissions, there are two ways to look at it. One value that you can pursue is the physical probability, the plausibility that the electricity that you use to produce your materials is really the energy that goes into your production sites. And from that perspective, you have a hierarchy that your own production or the energy that is directly supplied from a renewable energy source to your plant, that's the most reliable source of renewable energy. And if you cannot cover all your energy needs, you can then refer to a local energy average, which is assumed to be the best proxy for the reality. But here we have an issue about double counting, because the energy, for instance, that you acquire by a direct line, you get it in your account, but it's also added to the local average. So that same amount of renewable energy is accounted twice. And also for other industries that have access to renewable energy, you will count it into your local average. So to give an answer on that, there is the other perspective, that is the uniqueness of the claims. How unique is your renewable energy claim? And therefore, renewable energy generators, they issue a certificate, and some colleagues will talk more about the quality of those certificates. But basically, you can disconnect the value of the certificates from the delivery, the physical delivery of the energy. And although that the unique character of the renewable energy is guaranteed, here this lacks a bit of physical plausibility, because the energy can be put on one grid and you buy from another grid in a virtual situation. And so both have their value, both models have their value, but will also both have their shortcomings with regard to credibility. And therefore, the Joint Research Center, the scientific support of the Commission, when developing proposals or ideas on how to calculate the carbon footprint of batteries, they took the best of both worlds. They said, well, we recognize the value of the unique character, so we should not double count. The credibility of the claims should be guaranteed by certificates. But on the other hand, we understand the physical plausibility as well. And so they said, well, no virtual PPAs. You should really have a contract with a generator of renewable energy that puts the renewable energy on the grid from where you as a producer will get the energy from. So there's in fact a compromise between two extreme models, the one having an emphasis on physical plausibility and the other one on the uniqueness of the claims. So when we now compare the suggestions made with from the scientific support body and what is currently in the draft delegated act from the Commission, we see a huge difference. So where the JRC proposes or suggests to have this sequence of order, this hierarchical preference, so by far the first one, on-site generation, then supplier-specific. If you don't have this energy, then you have to look at the residual consumption mix. That means the average minus all the allocated energy. And only in countries where they don't have a reliable system of energy attribute certificates, then only then you could use the local average. But the draft delegated acts, they say, no, we do not follow this hierarchy. We just start with the average consumption mix. And they add another thing, and that's the direct connected electricity, because from physical plausibility, you cannot deny that system of direct connected electricity. But honestly, that's a poisoned gift. And that's what I will explain in my next slides. So why do we consider that a draft delegated act is problematic? Well, and on the first level, I have a question mark if it is in fact legal. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm inviting the lawyers in this audience, in this webinar, to think about this problem I see. When you look at the trilogue, the decision-making process on the battery regulation, there is the famous four columns document where you see how the Commission made a proposal. Then in the next column, you see the amendments proposed by the member states, the amendments proposed by the Parliament, and then the final agreement. And at a certain moment in this process, the Parliament has suggested to use the local average as the indicator for the Scope 2 emissions. But that has not been retained in the final compromise text. So that means that the decision makers in a democratic process have decided not to take the local average, but to refer to what's called the product environmental footprint category rules. That's an exercise that has been done before, that is referred to in several recommendations of the Commission. And so also in the battery regulation, they say, follow the instructions of the product environmental footprints. And what is not succeeded in the battery regulation, now we see that the Commission do it in a delegated act. So what has been refused during a democratic decision process now enters into the rules by a delegated act. And so it's a question mark if that is totally right. But again, I'm not a lawyer, but it's a question. The other thing is that the battery delegated acts cannot refer to other things than batteries. So that means that other product families, other product groups still refer to official recommendations, and they will still continue to apply the product environmental footprints category rules following, well, that was in fact the basis of the JRC model, where you start with energy attribute certificates and only residual when you don't have, etc. So that means that there will be a continuation of the use of product environment of energy attribute certificates. And if you do not deduct that from your average and using the residual, you have a massive greenwashing by double counting. Of course, the system also does not give any incentive to companies to invest in renewable energy, because they cannot claim the reduced carbon footprints in their products. Also, something that people do not really realize, that is the impact upstream. So if you look at the European battery manufacturers or material manufacturers, they consciously select their upstream suppliers, so the miners, the mining company, with a low footprint. And those footprints of those materials are based on current legislation. That means that they are using local PPAs to demonstrate their low carbon footprints. So that means that even if that draft delegated act would apply also upstream, then automatically our footprint of the materials that we buy will also increase. I just give the example of Indonesia. In Indonesia, you have, I will simplify, but you have nickel mines that are powered with green electricity supplied by PPAs, and you have nickel mines powered by coal-powered electricity, and that give, of course, a huge, very high carbon footprint. Today, we say we buy from those with a PPA and not those with a coal-powered plant. But if you will have to use an average, we will have no differentiation anymore in the upstream raw materials. We also see an issue, a problem with a geopolitical issue. So within the EU, there will be companies based in countries with a low carbon footprint and others with a high carbon footprint. Today, we are rewarded because of the PPAs that we have concluded, but in the future, it would rather be that it's more important where you are than rather what do you really contribute, but also on a global level. And that's why I said that the delegated act is a bit of a poisoned gift, because they allow, or they would allow, the idea of direct connections. And direct connections, that means that you have a separate grid from a renewable energy source supplying directly to your plant. And Europe has never been stimulating this model because it's more infrastructure, it's not efficient regarding grid stabilization, but also it takes a long time before you get all your permits. And so that's why the European countries said, well, you have the possibility to have your green energy via the normal grids, but then you have to acquire certificates. And that's an issue that we cannot solve with this delegated act. So why we say that the JRC model is a good model? Because it's a compromise between, on the one hand, the local, and on the other hand, the unique character, and it incentivizes. So it gives the companies the way or the mean that you have a direct link between the money they invest in renewable energy and the benefits they can grasp from having those certificates. Whereas if it would be over the average, then you invest in something and you do not have the immediate benefit, and moreover, it's watered down. So it's also in line with the Draghi report that says that you should not have any additional hurdles to PPAs, because PPAs are supposed to be one of the most important tools that Europe has to convert for the energy transition. And some people blame the GRC proposal that it's hard, or in general, the energy attribute certificates that's difficult to verify. But I would like to mention here that the battery regulation has the concept of notified bodies. So that means that whenever you put a battery on the European market, someone, a third party, will audit your claims. And so that's a challenge for the notified bodies, maybe, to do that verification, but that's their job. They are used to do that, and that's really what they do. And there are other provisions in the battery regulation that are much more difficult to verify, because there's no notified body required for that. And just one example is, if you export the batteries for recycling outside Europe, you have to do that under equivalent conditions as in Europe, but there's nobody that is really appointed to verify that. So for the energy and the scope 2 emissions, there is a notified body that will verify. So in short, that's our conclusion, that the JLC is indeed a good compromise between the two values of proximity and physical plausibility, and on the other hand, the unique character of the claims. Whereas the draft delegated act is in fact organizing double counting. And we really believe that the lack of incentives is really a problem if you look at in the broader picture of the European transition to clean energy. And we also think that it is not possible to have parallel systems of calculation footprints. So the delegated act on batteries can only regulate batteries, but what about all the other products? Can you, with the delegated act on batteries, really set the scene for all the products in the future? That's a big question mark. And okay, I keep it to this, and I hand over back to Annie.
Thank you so much, Jans. I think that's a really detailed overview of the issues that we're seeing in the Delegated Act. Worth mentioning as well, I mean, clearly the JRC sets out this hierarchy, but also very detailed safeguards. And these would be the safeguards that basically those competent bodies revert to when they're assessing these green claims. So that's why we think it's really, a rock solid way to determine that they're genuine claims. Exactly. So moving on, we're now going to have Friederike from Bosch, who's going to share their perspective. So please take the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Friederike Pischnik. I'm the Senior Manager for Governmental Affairs, and I have really been digging hard into the battery regulations over the past 4 years. And so maybe before we start into how Bosch is affected, just a quick introduction into our company. Most of you will probably know the logo from one power tool or washing machine at home. However, it's also important to note that if you're using any kinds of means of transport, it's very likely that components that we make are in it. So whether it's an e-bike or a car or a truck, very likely that we had something to do with it. Roughly, we have 429,000 employees worldwide at the Bosch Group, and therefore we also have over 60 locations worldwide and are facing this issue, obviously, not just in Germany, but at all of our locations. Before we start into the whole discussion about PPAs, I thought it was very important also to show you our journey that we are on to achieve carbon neutrality at Bosch, because of course PPAs is only one means to achieve carbon neutrality. And so we have been carbon neutral in our scopes 1 and 2 since 2020, being also the first automotive supplier to do so and set specific targets. And we have 4 levers to achieve carbon neutrality. And that, of course, means that we want to at first be more energy efficient at our plants in general. Then there is a second level of actually having what was named direct lines earlier, in terms of, for instance, having solar panels on our buildings and our production sites. And then the third one, which is what we're going to talk about more in detail today, is by purchasing green electricity. And then only the fourth level is the carbon offsets that are being used, especially in those countries where it is not or hardly possible to achieve any of those other means that I mentioned. I just wanted to get into this very quickly because sometimes there's this assumption that purchasing green electricity is the easy way out to go carbon neutral. But if you are a company like us that has submitted targets that have also been approved in the Science-Based Targets Initiative, then it's very crucial to also work on the very first levels that I've just mentioned. Coming to the concrete proposal and the requirements that we have from the batteries regulation, I wanted to quickly also set the background scene for us as a battery pack manufacturer at Bosch. We have this requirement now, the Delegated Act proposal out for the EV batteries, but it does not stop there. Even within the battery regulations, of course, we will have several delegated acts that have to be proposed for the methodology, because there are also different categories apart from the EV batteries that are affected by this requirement to declare a CO2 footprint. And also, you can see here, there is always 3 bubbles. So this is the first step will be the declaration, but after that, there will be performance classes introduced. And then in the long-term vision, we will even have thresholds. So certain batteries that fall below that threshold can still be placed on the market, but if you're above certain threshold, then you will no longer be able to place batteries on the European market. And so it is really something that is very complex and also holistically needs to be thought through. Bringing it back to Bosch and why we are affected, we ourselves, just to be very clear, are not battery cell producers, but we are battery pack manufacturers. That means all of the technologies that goes into, supervising charging and making sure we have safe charging processes, as well as performance and durability, is what is at the core of our business. So within the definition of EV batteries, our 48 mild hybrid battery packs fall. And later on, when we talk about light means of transport, also all of the battery packs that we produce for the e-bike system will fall within the scope. Having mentioned this, I think I can just reiterate what Jan said earlier. We are very worried about the current proposal, which only lets manufacturers account renewable energy if it's directly produced on the production side. I have said earlier that we are very busy with trying to produce as much directly as possible. I think in 2023, it was about 149 gigawatt hours that we were able to produce on site, but this by far does not cover the entire production energy needs that we have. And therefore, PPAs are very important for us to decarbonize within our company. And then the second point, as I said, as a global company, also European-wide acting company, the location-based mechanism is very much something that gathers competition within the EU, depending on which location you chose, probably many years ago, probably because also of know-how. In our case, we're producing the aforementioned battery packs in Germany, in Hungary, in Poland, so in many different member states, and they are very different depending on their geographical, but obviously also political circumstances regarding their CO2 intensity of electricity production. And I'm also going to mention another point, because we have such a wide product portfolio, we are also worried that this will not hold within the batteries regulation, because as we know from experience, and because we usually also want harmonization, that this methodology most likely will also enter into other legislature. And so I've just mentioned here a couple of them on the slides. I know that I will also look a bit closer into the first mentioned ones, but we do have various European legislation that either supports, acknowledges, or wants to actually facilitate PPAs, such as the Renewable Energy Directive, such as the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and such as the new Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And then on the right side, you can see on the slides, we also have many acts that are still to come that will require carbon footprints for various vehicles, but also with the eco design for many intermediary products and consumer products. And therefore, this is an important decision that we're currently taking that will have major impact also on how we're conducting our business in the future. So in conclusion, PPAs in combination with guarantees of origins are a key tool for our companies, but also for other companies that want to decarbonize their energy consumption. PPAs are essential for the expansion of renewable energy projects because they ensure that we are paying for green electricity being produced. And so planning is something that is very valuable for the energy providers and those who have renewable energy projects. And PPAs are promoted in other EU energy legislation and sustainability reporting legislation. Therefore, we need consistency throughout European legislation, but also when it comes to our sustainability reporting worldwide, and which Jan said is also important as a supplier to be giving out to our consumers, the original equipment manufacturers in a supplier position, because this is how they decide how to conduct their business. So we oppose a purely location-based approach for calculating electricity consumption, and we very, very much recommend switching to what is first of all globally recognized as sustainability reporting standards, so to include PPAs, and which is actually the recommendation by the JRC, which is the hierarchical methodology that Jan has tried to explain earlier, which is very much also combating double counting and ensuring that we do not have greenwashing worldwide. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Friederike. So we've heard from Umicore and Bosch about how they're really investing in renewables, how this is really important for their manufacturing base here in Europe. And Friederike made that point really well of just this. Really, we need that clear regulatory framework, right? I mean, in the spirit of cutting red tape, this new mantra of the incoming commission, we can't have one rule saying one thing and another saying another. And really, you know, the good work of companies like Umicore and Bosch need to be recognized and, you know, proven in that sustainability reporting and recognized as genuine decarbonisation. So thank you so much for that. And now we're going to move over to Merve. So Merve is from the Energy Certificates Association, and she's going to shed a bit more light on, you know, how do these guarantees of origin work in practice and why they're so important to really underpin these green energy claims. So Merve, hand over to you.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks a lot, Friederike, and thanks, Jan. I'm Merve Güngör from the REX Energy Certificate Association. I think I should be able to move to the next slide. Yes, now it works. And I will talk about the power of market-based tools, pun intended, because power is such an essential component of our modern lives. It's this invisible ingredient of almost every product and service we use, but we often take it for granted. I liken it to orange juice. Like, for example, if we have fair trade oranges that we juice and we have non-fair trade oranges, so once the juice is mixed, it's not actually possible to separate the fair trade orange juice drops from the rest. So for electricity, we have a similar situation. And that's why we have a book and claim system. And I'm going to talk more about that. But before I get to that, I'd like to talk about what REX does. So REX, Energy Certificate Association, is a business association with over 130 members. And our main aim is to tackle climate crisis through accelerating the uptake of renewables. And we think renewable energy certificates play a big role in that. Jan referred to them as Energy Attribute Certificate, EAC, which is the proper name for that. And in Europe, this system is called Guarantee of Origin, GO. So in order to educate everyone about the use of renewable energy certificates and the role they play, we have over 1,000 resources, and we have organized so far over 80 events. And majority of our membership is from Europe, but we say we have a European focus with a global perspective because we also have members from outside of Europe. So coming back to the GO, you also see it written as GOO. I say it's like your ID card or your passport. So when I tell you my name is Merve, you believe me, I hope. But if I go to a financial institution or a legal institution, I cannot just say this is my identity. They would require me to prove that. So the GO is the ID card for renewable energy because it represents the renewable attributes. And it also has the basic information my ID card has, when I was born, where I was born, etc. So I don't just, make a claim, like not substantiated claim, but I prove that with a document. And you see on the visual on the left side that an EAC, so GO in Europe, is like a founding block of any procurement method. So this can be a renewable corporate PPA, or it can be a green tariff you make with your supplier. For example, as a household, I have a green tariff with my supplier. You could be using an eco label as well to take an extra step, but regardless of the procurement method you choose, there is a GO at the basis of it. And this is because this is regulated by the European Commission. So like I said, all procurement methods are backed by a GO in Europe if they are for renewable energy. And basically the GO is a reliable document that gives transparent information. So that's basically in a nutshell what a GO is. And I didn't make this up. This is embedded in the regulatory landscape. So the directive in 1996, you see on the first line, it's about the internal electricity market. And the second one in 2001, it is about the promoting the use of electricity from renewable sources. And the one you see in 2009, that is what we call RED 1, the first renewable energy directive. And basically, these directives have set the geo landscape. And right now, the guarantee of origin is embedded in the Internal Energy Market Directive, for example, and in the Annex 1.5, GEOs are referenced as a tool for the disclosure of source of energy, and the makeup of a supplier's fuel mix is also done by reporting GEOs. And also the regulation about governance of the energy union. There also GEOs are mentioned as a part of the broader transparency mechanisms. And obviously the RED 2 and RED 3 clarified some of the points, such as the life cycle of a GEO, for example. So basically all these directives, regulations, and even more actually refer to the GEOs. But the thing is, when different pieces of regulation mention GEOs or omit mentioning GEOs, it can create confusion, and that's the last thing we need. There is no need to reinvent the wheel, basically. And in order to have a clear regulatory framework in the EU, it's important that all legislation is aligned. Jan also underlined this. And on the one hand, this is concerning, but on the other hand, I'm happy to hear that we are not the only one that's concerned here. So speaking about what exists and improving what exists instead of reinventing the wheel, I can talk about PPAs. And to answer the question in the title right away, how does a GO put renewable in a PPA? Basically, GOs enable the consumers to make a unique claim. So a unique claim here refers to if I make a claim based on a megawatt hour, Annie, for example, is not making a claim on the same megawatt hour. I know that I am the only owner of the attributes of that 1 megawatt hour. So basically, GEO is a tool enabling that. So same as when I say this is my name and I have my number, identity number, no one else is claiming they are also me because I am the owner of my identity, my ID card. So in this case, it is the GEO. And you see the visual on the left side. Actually, the first part is from the resource publication talking about different types of PPAs, and Annie briefly mentioned that. So PPA is basically a financial document after all, and there are many different types of PPAs, but in its essence, basically it's a preferably long-term contractual agreement between the buyer and the generator. There can be other parties involved, financial institutions or legal institutions, but basically it is an agreement for renewable electricity supply. And PPAs are a market tool that is already used by corporates in Europe, and it enables consumers to invest in renewable energy and give a clear market signal about their preferences. And also, having made a renewable PPA, they can basically make a unique claim and say, you know, we have invested in wind power, solar power, you know, in this and that location, commissioned on this date. So they can basically make a unique claim about their PPA. And this is very important because we see here the corporates taking proactive effort, you know, this is how they take charge. They are not just bound by their location. So empowering consumers is very important for the Clean Industrial Deal and to basically support the energy transition that is already happening. We are already part of the clean energy transition. And PPAs are definitely one of the ways corporates can buy renewable energy and basically play their role in that. And Europe is a single market for electricity. But you see here the data from the our World in Data, and you see the grid intensity is different. And if you are only bound by your location, then that's it. You can't do anything. And here I included some numbers just for your information. So the CO2 intensity of the Polish grid, for example, is much higher than China, Colombia, Brazil, Costa Rica. So does it mean that you cannot have any clean production in Europe or in Poland, for example? It shouldn't be the case. So if consumers are able to play their role in decarbonization, then they can do so with market-based tools, because this basically enables them to have a global impact by taking local action. So otherwise, there is basically no option for them to take an action. And I think this is an important point to highlight. And luckily, it's possible to do in Europe. Like I mentioned, we have a robust attribute tracking system. The GEOs are audited and verified. This is partially due to the strict rules and protocols AIB has. AIB stands for Association of Issuing Bodies. So the organizations, institutions issuing these GEO certificates in Europe, they can join the AIB. And AIB basically follows the EEC system, European Energy Certificate System. And there are different protocols for auditing and oversight, like I said. And so the EU is not one homogeneous entity, as we all know. So neither are the AIB members. There can be some individual differences. But the thing is, overall, the accuracy of the information provided on a geo and the recognition, the fact that one geo is recognized in another country. So these things are the, fundamentally same parts. And the EEC system has also been a model for tracking outside Europe as well, such as the iTrack standard. And there is a question in the Q&A. I can take that later on. So moving on to my last slide. Why do voluntary reporting initiatives matter? So we see that a lot of corporates use renewables for compliance purposes, but many of them also do voluntarily. And this is encouraged by organizations such as CDP, RE100, and Greenhouse Gas Protocol, science-based targets, and there are even other reporting initiatives. Basically, you can't control what you don't measure, and disclosure is an important, powerful tool, and consumer empowerment is essential for making a global climate impact. So with that, I finish. Thank you very much. Feel free to ask any questions you have, and you can learn more about REX through scanning the code. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Merve. So we've basically now heard from key battery manufacturers and companies in the manufacturing chain saying we really need PPAs in order to demonstrate decarbonisation. Merve, you've really shown us there's no cheating of the system. These corporates are making genuine claims, and it's really driving investment signals for new wind and solar. So this is really a win-win situation. And indeed, all these high standards that we have in Europe, this is what these competent bodies will be referring to in the member states when the batteries come in, when those green claims come in from third countries. We basically export our standards to the rest of the world effectively by holding these batteries to the same standards that we're holding companies like Bosch and Umicore to in Europe. So to complete this picture, because of course, one side of the picture is of course the buyers of this renewable energy, but we also have the suppliers, which really rely on PPAs as a financing tool. So Anne, shed a bit more light from the perspective of ENGIE.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Anne Idia. I work at ENGIE. ENGIE is a global leader in low carbon solutions. We do have a global footprint. We're a global company. Our present in over 30 countries, but we do have a significant European presence. And I'm here to talk to you about, well, the role of energy markets tools in financing the assets that we built. Sorry, trying to, move the slides a bit. Just wanted to show you the current picture, basically, of corporate renewable PPAs in Europe. This is basically a chart that is compiled by Resource that shows the corporate PPA volume announcements in Europe in gigawatts. So basically, these are the PPAs that are contracted by corporates, by our clients, and by developers, by us, for instance, and the likes of ENGIE, across Europe in the past 10 years. And basically what you can see here is that there's a huge amount of announcement that has been made over time. 48 gigawatts of corporate PPAs have been announced. And at least 3/4 of that are announcements that were made for new renewable assets, new renewable facilities. So projects that have been commissioned over time, but that didn't exist when the announcement was made. And what you can see as well on that chart is that the momentum, the real momentum is kind of a recent one. Up to 2020, indeed, corporate PPAs were used, but were not mainstream. Since 2021, the momentum has accelerated. And basically 75% of the entire corporate PPA volumes that were announced so far have been contracted in the past 4 years. So this is really something that has changed scale, that is on an upward trend. And that is really, and why is that so? It's basically, we heard it, it's beneficial for the clients. It helps them achieve their sustainability claims, but it is also very much beneficial for the likes of ENGIE, for the developers, for the companies whose objective is to put more renewables on the ground year on year. And that's why it is an essential part of corporate strategy, but also companies like us, I mean, our strategy as well. Because as ENGIE, for instance, we do have an objective to commission and to put on the ground 80 gigawatts of renewables by 2030. PPAs is an essential tool for us to achieve that goal. This is basically the same view as the one on the previous slide, but it is a view by country. So you can see here, those 48 gigawatts, the breakdown by country. And you can basically see that it is not, happening just in one single European country. It's happening all across the board. So that's basically a tool that's used in Germany, in France, in Spain, obviously, but also it's picking up. You wouldn't, hear or talk about, a PPA in Greece 5 years ago. Now, corporates and developers are starting to use PPAs in more and more European geographies. So that's something to be aware of. And why are PPAs key to developers like us? It's because they enable us to secure steady revenues over the long run. And why is that key for us? It is key because we need to finance these projects, and we need lenders to finance these projects. We obviously, we do use capital, but we need to recycle that capital, and so lenders come into play. And the PPAs, with those revenues that stretch, that are stable and that stretch over a long period of time, they provide lenders the certainty that they need, basically, to lend us that money. And thus, basically, PPA in a nutshell are a critical element of private investment in renewable assets. In terms of how did they contribute so far, the two charts that you see on the right-hand side, they showcase basically on the left-hand side, the blue bar is the total installed capacity for wind and power in the country, and the bar on the right-hand side, the green one, is the contracted capacity that has been claimed through corporate PPAs over time. And you can see that basically PPAs are already a significant chunk compared to the number of gigawatts that are already commissioned. So they're not a marginal tool. They are a tool that we're using more and more, that corporates are using more and more in Europe. And they're enabling, they act as a relay to public financing in a way, because otherwise, what are the other tools that we can use as developers to finance our PPAs? It's basically, public subsidies, mostly. National auctions, obviously. The revenues coming from national auctions. So they are definitely another tool that we want to keep in our toolbox in order to put more and more renewable on the ground going forward. That's it in a nutshell for me, Annie.
Amazing. Thank you, Anne. So to recap what we've heard, manufacturers need to sign PPAs in order to decarbonize. We have a rock solid system in Europe, which accounts for no double counting, only claim energy once. And that final piece of the picture, that suppliers really are looking to sign PPAs in order to finance new wind and solar. As we know, those looming energy targets in the EU are just around the corner. So we need private and public capital to really bring as much wind and solar online. If we could just go to my summary slide, Bea. Thank you. I won't read through all of this, but you're going to have the recording afterwards, and we can also send you the slides if that would be helpful for your work. But here I've just summarized really the key arguments of why we need to have the recognition of market tools in the batteries regulation. Namely also because in the actual original regulation, it does refer to the use of the JRC tool. So therefore, the Delegated Act should also refer to the JRC hierarchy and safeguards. But I'll let you take that away and have a read. We did have a couple of questions coming in, which really hit the nail on the head of why we think the Commission has not gone in the direction of market tools. One question being, how do we really make sure that those claims coming from third countries are valid? And then a second question of how can we assure that there's no double counting of renewable energies, which I think we have somewhat answered. But maybe Merve, do you want to quickly just recap how we can avoid double counting in the EU? And then maybe I throw the question to the other speakers of how we make sure that those claims are valid coming from third countries.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Annie, and thanks for your questions. So in Europe, like I mentioned, a GO needs to be cancelled when basically before any consumer makes a claim. And the reason why this is done is so that if I'm making claim on a certain megawatt hour, someone else does not make that claim as well. So this is what enables me to make a unique claim. And when a GO is cancelled, so cancelled can sound like a negative word, but it just means that that specific GO is removed from circulation. So it cannot be bought and sold by anyone else. So there is a registry and there is a particular megawatt, or not particular megawatt hour, let's say 1 gigawatt hour that I am making a claim on, then the GOs associated with that 1 gigawatt hour is removed from the system. So they cannot be circulated on the system anymore. So that's the short answer to how double counting is avoided. But of course, if you make a PPA and if you don't have the GOs associated with that, then theoretically, the supplier can sell those GOs to another consumer because those GOs are not removed from the system for your name. So that's why we mention GOs as an important component of every procurement method.
And that's also really why the residual mix also needs to be taken into account, because of course this is the mix after those GOs have been counted. So indeed, we see these very rock solid safeguards in the JRC reports. These would basically be what these competent bodies are using to assess the green claim. So, the fact that it needs to be from an independent third party of certificates, it needs to be a unique claim, it needs to specify what technology it's coming from. There's a lot of detail that can be basically applied as criteria to these claims coming in from third countries and enable these competent bodies to be able to reject or accept. Jan, I don't know if you had any further thoughts on how we can really include these safeguards.
Yeah, I refer to the question that talks about what is the reliability of the energy attribute certificates from third countries. I think that the JRC has made a nice analysis of set of criteria that has to comply. And it's an objective analysis of a country's system that you can make. And then you can say, well, the system in that third country is compliant with the JRC rules or not. So you can do that once in a while, maybe every year, to see if there are new rules in that country of origin of the batteries, if the system as such is compliant with the JRC rules or not. And then on a second level, of course, you have the individual importers of batteries. They can cheat the system. Yeah? And there comes indeed the verification by notified bodies. So the qualification of the system on a system level in a third country, that's something relatively easy to do. And then the implication on the level of the individual actors, but you cannot reject a good system because there is a risk on cheaters. And so that distinction should be made. Is the system compliant? Everyone is then okay. And then the level of the individual companies adhering to those standards. But that's everywhere. That's always for all kinds of rules. If the system is okay, there can always be people that don't comply. But you have to verify. Yeah, that's part of the game.
Great. So I don't see any more questions coming through. You will be receiving our slides in this recording, so I really hope that it's been useful for your work. I take the opportunity to thank everyone for preparing these presentations. We've really heard from the whole value chain, and We hope that the call is clear, that we need these market instruments recognised in order to have true decarbonisation, real green batteries on the system, and really be contributing to this energy transition. We need all the tools that we can get there. It's not going to be an easy pathway to net zero, but with these right signals in place in the regulatory framework, we'll get there quicker, I'm sure. So thank you very much for tuning in, and please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have further questions, and we really hope that you use this as the discussions around the batteries regulation continue. All right, thank you very much.